Hey guys, it's Yegi Shatini, and today I wanted to talk about how I implemented the background music for our game Chroma. Last video I looked directly inside of Wise and how we ship the game, so today I wanted to convert that into Metasounds and directly in Unreal Engine for those of you that can't use Wise or just for general practice. So, background music, remember this is just going over the four base levels, no boss implementation. The key difference here is that we're using the audio modulation plugin. This is standard in Unreal. I'm using 5.5, so you just might have to make sure it's enabled on your end. And then same disclaimers again. Just most importantly here, there's, I would say, even more ways to actually implement these things in Unreal Engine directly, primarily because we can't use Wise as the DAW itself. You just really have to know how you're exporting the audio files and putting them in the project, because that can change a ton of how you implement the actual audio. The rest of it's the same though. Our level starts, music plays, and then we'll have our low pass effect for low health and shop opening, and then new level starts and so on. And then our track, same A, B, and C sections. You'll notice here I am going to play around a bit more with randomization, so B can go to C, C can go to B, and so on. It'll, it's up to randomness at that point. So let's look at our project. I'm using just the standard third-person controller. Music starts, I have my low pass, all that stuff. So let's take a look at it. Now, most importantly here, we just have our Metasound sources and then a couple patches and then some of the control bus stuff. This is a good time. If you don't have the plugin enabled, you can check audio, modulation. If you don't see modulation here under audio, you just have to go to your plugin settings, enable it, and then restart the engine. So the key thing here being the Metasound. This is what's controlling this level's music. These are my A, B, and C stems, and that's just going through the output. Now we'll look at these patches later, but let's kind of see how this is triggering. When my level loads, my input gets triggered, and then that's going to go into a trigger repeat. Now, I use trigger repeat for most of these things. If you look at the wave player, you do have an option to loop and kind of controlling when the loop starts. But this is another thing, how I was saying, like knowing how you exported your audio. Most of mine are not clean loops, and I find it just way easier to use trigger repeat. And then for your period, it's 173 BPM in my case, 16 measures. This is just BPM to seconds math you want to get comfortable with. So every 16 measures, it's going to fire this trigger repeat. Now this goes into a trigger filter. This is just a coin flip. In my case, 0.6 of the time, it's going to go heads and play my A section. And then the other 40%, it'll go and play either my B or C section based on a random 0 or 1, and then it's going to select one of those two things. Now doing it this way does make it so I could hit heads twice in a row and I play my A section twice, so that's not ideal, but because of how my ad-libs work and the little melodies on top, I figured it's fine. The cleaner way, which I have kind of shown in a separate meta sound, would be probably to just use a trigger sequence, and then say maybe you will always start with your A section, and then your out can then go into, a random A or B or C section, kind of doing it that way. This way you're guaranteed to hit A and then guaranteed to hit either B or C, how it was mostly how we did in Wise. Or if you want to guarantee, you can make this trigger 4 and go A, B, A, C, however you want to connect them. But since my 3 sections all sounded mostly the same, I was okay with sometimes these sections triggering twice in a row. So if we look at the Metasound patch itself, this is probably one of my favorite reasons to use Metasounds instead of Wise. Now, you can do a lot of fancy things in patches. Again, this isn't a guide per se, but I like using patches just to keep things a lot cleaner, because all of this can go inside your main meta sound, but it will get a lot more cluttered, I feel. So all this patch is doing is just making it so I keep my drums, bass, other, and vocal tracks or vocal stems all together. I'm not using vocals. I just left this here to have a fourth slot. And then say you figure out you need a fifth track later, you could just add another wave player here, and then it would update inside of your main patch. So you don't need to actually kind of move things around. It keeps things a lot more contained. So that's all that's happening with the main stem. Not too fancy here. I just plugged in my core 3 tracks and then they just play together. If you have your wave player again and you're bouncing the audio all together, remember I just kind of took the stems how I had them inside of Wise. If I were to do this from scratch, I would just have a bunch of melodies and a bunch of the rhythm all together in one wave file. So that way I could just do a random get and then have an array of like 4 or 5 variants of my A section, and it would just all go in here. And then considering these are all similar in itself, I might have like 10 variants with different bass lines, different drum patterns that are all similar enough. And then instead of dealing with these 3 sections, I'll have it just going through one wave asset. But that's part of how I was saying it's really important for you to know the audio you're working with and what makes it easier for you. So if you're implementing and composing the files themselves, then just do whatever feels best for you, honestly. And this is what I had to work with, so that's what we're doing here. Now, my ad-libs is the only other thing going in here. This is the only 2 things that are triggering on play. My metronome isn't connected, so I have the main stems, the drums and bass, and then my ad-libs, which were the little melodies playing on top. Now, I have a different BPM second calculation here. You could just use this one and divide by 2, but this one's happening every 8 bars. So sometimes I have the option of it triggering in the middle of a phrase. And inside of my ad-libs patch has a little more stuff, but again, I have 4 wave players because I have 4 different ad-lib stems. Right, so all 4 of those, I just want to choose one at random, basically. So I have them going through a trigger select, and then before that I have a random int, which is going to pick from 0 to 3, and then it's just going to pick 0, 1, 2, or 3 to play. Now, controlling that is another trigger repeat, which again, this is happening every 8 bars. And then that's going into a filter, which is, again, my coin flip. If I hit heads, which I have set right now for 70% of the time, then I'm going to pick one of the 4. If I hit tails 30% of the time, then it's just not connected to anything, so do nothing. That's probably too frequent, right? If you find that happening too much, then you just change the probability here. But that's it. So then once this plays, every 8 bars, I might hear an ad-lib, and every 16, I'm going to get one of these 3 sections to play. And then that goes to the output. Now, I placed that meta sound in the level itself, so I could reference it in my level blueprint, which is here. Now, again, not a guide, but you should hopefully know how to make a quartz clock. I know Brian Michael Fuller has a bunch of guides, Dan Reynolds, they all have kind of guides talking through making the quartz clock. This just lets you keep everything in time, and you could trigger events how you need to. My clock is started. I'm not using this subscribe to quantization event. This is just so we could see maybe I want my ad-libs to happen every beat if there were a lot shorter melodies, or every few beats and choose from that, but I didn't end up doing it this way. All I'm really doing here is playing quantized, so Unreal Engine itself is following where my beat is. And then that's just a reference to the Metasound. Now, this low pass filter, right, if I'm losing health, I'll go over in a second. I just wanted to quickly show the one other option I was toying around with, trying to keep everything even more contained almost, and then considering we have 4 different levels, 4 different tracks, a way to do all of that in one place. So this Metasound patch looks a lot bigger and messier, but really this is my A section, my B section, and then my C section all in one patch. And then this input ABC section is just going to choose, do I want my A, B, or C to actually come through? And then this is controlling here. This approach is pretty much identical to how I did it in Wise. So once this repeat triggers, I'm resetting my value to 0. It plays my A. And then once it triggers again, I'm going to my second part of the sequence, which is going to randomly choose 1 or 2, which is my B or C section. So these are all test sample noises, just so we could see which one's coming out here. It's just white noise and different random sample audio. So it's going to start with A, and then B, A, B, A, C, A, B, and so on. It'll repeat. So you just change the period you have here, and then you could have kind of what we did in our other stems, but all in one place. So this one's a lot cleaner, a lot less to worry about, but it guarantees you're always going to get A first and then one of the 2 other sections. From there, you would maybe say this would be your out for 1, and this index is your level. So then you'd have another patch containing your 2nd level music, 3rd level music, and so on, to keep all 4 levels then in one Metasound instead of having 1 for each level. All right, so my low pass filter, this is the last thing. There's a lot more stuff when you're doing it directly in Unreal Engine. We don't just have a parameter we could set through Wise with our, wherever our player health is, or shop stat. So we need to do low pass kind of separately. Now, this control bus mix, that's what we created with the audio modulation, right? These 2 things here. We made the control bus with our low pass filter, just create a modulation for low pass, and then on our control bus mix, we added that control bus low pass filter here, defaulting to no low pass, which would be 20,000 hertz. And then as we control that variable, we add the low pass. So from here, I just created a widget to control it so you could see it visually. You don't need to do that. But it makes it a lot easier if you have a widget blueprint. Just with the audio frequency radial slider, I added that in just so I could, again, see it a little clearer what I'm controlling. All I'm doing with this is setting the variable for the frequency. And this is something that you would probably set on your player character, like wherever your health is, and then that's what would change that variable itself. So in my level blueprint, again, off of my widget, I'm just getting that variable I set, right, frequency, and then that frequency is what changes my control bus mix by filter. I just plug in the filter I want to change. In this case, it's just my low pass, and then the address. It's always going to be written here. If you don't know what the address is, or if you're dealing with a lot more different filters, make sure you copy that properly. Yep, so I just control that. You would not put this on event tick. Again, like where if your player takes damage, that's where you would call this. Maybe for some reason you want to do it every bar or something, which is just less frequent than a tick. You could do it over here with your quantization event. This is just for demonstration purposes. So when I click play and I control it with no low pass, as I lose health, it gets low passed here. right? Or if I'm in the shop, I beat the level, this value would just instantly snap to wherever I felt right for, shop music, probably a little less. All right, so a bit more to handle when you're dealing with all of this inside of Unreal Engine itself, and including all the audio that you have to import and make sure it's organized for your project. And it's just a little different process. A couple more steps I find, because obviously you have to do all this in the level blueprint instead of just a post sound. Now, again, you don't have to quantize any of this if you're not going to call things to the beat or do anything like that. You can just play sound, if that works for you, and then in your sound, just find your meta sound. Which one? Trump BPM. And then, like, this works just the same. Oh, well, yeah, now my other things are being connected, or errors because they're not playing. But that's all you have to do. I just like having things quantized because then you have the option to do a lot more with the audio and call things when you need to call them. And this just kind of guarantees it's all set together. Ooh. All right. So, yeah, using the low pass, that was kind of the biggest part that was really different, because it's like you have to make the control bus mix and make sure all of that's set up. But if you have any questions with how I set up this process, or any other options you have, like I showed the other method, and there are like 100 ways to do this. So let me know what you would do differently, and how you would implement that. The next video will be showing the boss music itself, which has a lot more different things happening, including the phase changing. So that's a bit more fun. But yeah, if you have questions, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you later. Thanks. Bye.